Hello, everybody. Joshua Phillips for Living Reason. I, on my own, have decided to start studying the philosophy of mathematics. So this video is Are Numbers Real? Philosophy of Math, Episode 0. I talk about some stuff prior to diving into the study of the field. So as I record this, I've read through some of the basic Wikipedia stuff. I've read through a few entries online and sort of skimmed for what seemed to be ideas similar to my initial impressions, but I haven't, dove into the field of philosophy of math. The idea of this video is I wanted to record and have something for when I want to look back in the future on what I thought now, and after I start studying the field, how my ideas change, my presentation changes, etc. My hope is I'll start having a series on the channel on the philosophy of math as I study it and as I read it, talking about the material, the arguments, my views. As my views change, maybe re-recording where I'm currently at. But this one I'm calling Episode 0 because it's prior to me really studying the field. So my thoughts as I've broken it down right now prior to a serious study. One, I really don't like the idea that to make a philosophy of mathematics that is explaining what mathematics is, I don't like the idea that numbers or mathematical objects, mathematical structures, however we choose to talk about it, is real in a Platonic, abstract sense. So the idea that for instance, the number 3 or the structure of the natural numbers, that those are things which are some kind of abstract object which somehow exists in a way that is at least analogous to how I exist, or the computer I'm recording this on exists, or the state of Oklahoma exists. It seems really strange to me to think of mathematical objects as objects. So I'm going to tend to be very suspicious of that framing, which I believe is called Platonic realism. As I said, I've skimmed a little bit, so I'm very skeptical of that idea. On the other hand, I'm also deeply skeptical of a view of mathematics philosophically that reduces it to just a game of symbols that has no meaning in reality, or that mathematics is merely some rules that we adopted, we play around with the rules, and inexplicably every once in a while we can use one of those rules to do physics or chemistry with. For a few reasons. One, historically math developed from physical interaction. You were looking at objects or keeping track of objects, and you developed math to handle them. Secondly, conceptually, I don't think math is an arbitrary game of symbols we're playing. It might be interesting to think about how arbitrary we can get with the game, but the task of mathematics strikes me as not being about mere manipulation of things out of thin air. So, the third point there, a philosophy that explains what mathematics is, what numbers are in some sense, I want it to be about reality in a really robust way without invoking any kind of abstract realm where the numbers are hiding out. So, for instance, math is really good at doing physics, doing chemistry, anywhere you see applications of math, math shows up everywhere. And I don't think the explanation for that is mystical, and I don't think the explanation for that is purely a social construction or that we just keep choosing to use math so it's over. I think it is that because of what mathematics is, it ends up showing up all the time because it's a great way of describing reality and understanding the world. So those are 3 little points that are sort of my skepticisms or goals. As I've thought about it, the way I would present my current view is that a philosophy of mathematics, that mathematics is about the study of concepts, or we might say abstract ideas, that are specifically about formally behaving objects. So that is things which can behave in any kind of way we might imagine, or which might be logically conceivable, constrained only by something like they behave in a formal, precise way, and they have some kind of law of identity. From the bits of skimming I've been doing and the little bits of reading, I believe this view is similar to what's called modal structuralism, the idea that the existence of mathematics is that math is the set of facts about the set of possible objects. That is, if something is logically possible, then we can study it mathematically. We can imagine a logically possible object that behaves like the natural numbers, or like division modulo 7. And because we can imagine it, we can talk about how it would behave if it were a physical thing. My view is that mathematical objects are specifically these concepts we have, and that we can study them as mathematical concepts when they are, we might say, envisioned objects that have very specific formal behavior. I need to think about what formal behavior means, and that they have a specific behavior, some kind of identity to how they behave. So that's where I'm at currently right now. I guess an extremely brief summary of it would be, I don't think numbers are mystically real. I don't think if there's any sense in which you can go find the number 3, except that people have a concept of numbers that has 3 in it, or that you can have 3 objects. I don't think there's any 3-ness itself. But on the other hand, I do think mathematics is about something very fundamental to reality, which is that we can imagine or abstract away from particular objects to the idea of a formal object's behavior and the analogy between that formal imagined object and how applicable that imagined thing or that envisioned thing in our head is compared to some physical thing we want to predict how it will behave. So thank you everybody for watching. I know this is a bit of a weird video. I'm calling it episode 0 because if and when I get around to episode 1, I'll try to make that a proper introduction to the philosophy of mathematics, introducing, for instance, the major questions, some very rough outlines of the basic major positions. Yeah, I actually think, I'm not going to argue here the practicality of the philosophy of mathematics, but as I've read a little bit so far, I've simultaneously found it really frustrating at times to be reading through what felt like fairly arcane essays, where in some paragraphs I felt like I was agreeing with the writer, in some paragraphs I suddenly felt like they had gone off the deep end and were making no sense whatsoever. But it's interesting personally getting into this because I know I'm going to have to study some formal logic. I mentioned modal structuralism as being something that I think is close but not the same as my current position. That's going to require a lot of logic, some other philosophy reading. But I'm excited. I'm not sure how interested people on the channel will be. I'm really curious about feedback. As always, if you like the content, I appreciate sharing it the most. Thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully we'll be talking more about philosophy of math soon. Or, have some fun, scream at each other about whether 2 + 2 really equals 4. If you're being generous and add a free, But thank you everybody very much. Thanks for watching. This is Joshua Phillips for Living Reason. Have a nice day.